All right, I'd like for you to turn this morning to Genesis 34. Continuing in our Bible reading series here. Coming up on week 3. Encouraging you to keep up, read along, catch up, or start anew, whatever it may be on the schedule there. Because we have an opportunity here when we do this together corporately, we have an opportunity to be talking about the same thing that we're reading. Whether it be, during our Bible hour or in church, after church, all those times throughout the week, we have an opportunity to do that. This week, we will finish the book of Genesis. And the primary focus is the life of Joseph. So I'll say what I said last week to kind of push through on that. We've had a 6-part series on the book of Joseph not too long ago. We had the message on Tamar, Judah and Tamar as well. That's going to be in there again. So it's worth rereading. It's worth moving forward in it and reminding ourselves in it. I want you to keep in mind that there are the subplots here. The primary story is going on, but there's these subplots that are interjected throughout the whole course of events. And these highlight the extreme dysfunction of the family of Jacob. The 12 sons of Jacob are highlighted pretty significantly in this. The story today will help us fill that out a bit more regarding that. The message today will give us a little bit of insight to focus on those who are kind of caught in the middle of circumstances of no reason in and of themselves, but yet still caught in these tragic circumstances. But Jacob and his sons and their interaction with each other and with other people here. Jacob's early life really characterized by deception. And as the story unfolds, not only did Joseph was a deceiver in his early days, but in his later days he was deceived. So it's kind of interesting, you kind of reap what you sow, and that's a biblical principle as well. But we're going to see a sampling of that dysfunction here as we read this week. Of course, you're familiar with Jacob and his 2 wives, Rachel and Leah, and then their maidservants, and how Jacob bore children through all 4 of those women. And that we have these examples, and that was one of the points I made last week. These things are written in the scriptures for our example. Christianity globally is anti multiple spouses. And there's a reason for that, because the scriptures, the examples that the scriptures give are really very clear. I mean, it just doesn't turn out well. It's a recipe for disunity. It's a recipe for all kinds of problems, and this would be one of those examples as well. We already touched upon last week the Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar love triangle there that was going on and the problems that caused, but here as well in the section for this week. There's a great example of problems within the family. Multiple wives create multiple problems, but also even among the children. Genesis 35:22 is that it's just mentioned as a blip almost. In Genesis 35:22, we're going to be reading in 34 here this morning, but in Genesis 35:22, it says this, and it happened, almost as if it's matter of fact, and it happened when Israel dwelt in the land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. And Israel heard about it. Israel being Jacob. God changed Jacob's name to Israel. So, how bizarre is this regarding dysfunction? But the maidservant was probably much younger than Leah and Rachel. And so the firstborn of the 12 ends up having a sexual relationship with his father's handmaiden, concubine. Okay? That's dysfunction in a major way. And she was the concubine of Rachel, and her name was Bilhah, and she was the mother of the two sons Dan and Naphtali, who were part of the 12 tribes of Israel. This probably the scripture seem to allude at this because Reuben, being the firstborn, would have had a double inheritance, but he seems to have lost that inheritance because of what he did in having a sexual relationship with one of his father's wives. At least that seems to be alluded to in Genesis 49 verses 3 and 4 on Jacob's deathbed. He's giving the future of all of his sons, and that's what he seems to allude to regarding Reuben. In the sequence of events here, we'll get back to chapter 34 in just a moment, but Joseph's story begins in Genesis 37. The Judah and Tamar circumstance happened where another sexual relationship, daughter and father-in-law, Genesis 38. And we see that these there, I believe they are included in the scriptures, not because the Bible likes to talk about the dirty laundry so much as it does the transformation that occurs. Because we see this family of dysfunction. We see the patriarch of the family, Jacob, a deceiver who's being deceived. We are learning in this that you reap what you sow. We learn in this that as time unfolds, circumstances change and people change. And certainly that was the case. In the 21 plus years from when Joseph was sold into slavery and 21 years later when his brothers are standing before him, his brothers, are different people than they were back in the day. All of them had gone through some changes, but most notably Judah and Reuben especially were very different people then as they stood before him. That's what happens though. People get humbled and they begin to have more of a humble personality. Humility has a greater part of their lives. The Lord uses poor choices. These are the things that we want to glean as we read these stories and these subplots in the stories. The Lord uses poor choices. Their ramifications also make us better and more usable people. That should be an encouragement to us, because we're just like Reuben and Judah and Jacob and all that. Our propensity is the same. Remember what I shared with you last week. They were people of their times. We want to keep that in mind. And they were very human, prone to poor decisions. And of course, these things are there for our learning as well. Okay, so for today here we want to look at this story of this woman named Dinah. Okay? And so week 3 here, we're going to look at this, and this will be included in your reading as well, but this is the story of Dinah. And this will be a person who truly was a victim. Now, on multiple levels here, we're going to see how she was the victim of some circumstances. So what we want to do is look at some points to consider here regarding this woman named Dinah. Okay? Genesis chapter 34. Let's start reading there in verse 1. We see that Dinah is the only known daughter of Jacob. Doesn't mean that Jacob didn't have any more daughters, but she is the only one mentioned ever in the scriptures regarding the 12 sons of Jacob and one daughter. Her name was Dinah. Verse 1 tells us that. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. You kind of get the feeling as we read this here that she was just kind of going out and exploring the world, growing up in a home with 4 boys and very much a male-dominated family. It specifically says that she went out just to be with other women, apparently, the way it is written here. And but that's where the trouble began, because boy, did she get introduced to a different world when she left her family of orientation and out to visit other women Because verse 2 tells us about the fact how she was sexually abused. Okay? Look with me, verse 2. Verses 2 through 5. We'll go ahead and read that and then make a couple comments here. So, and when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and violated her. His soul was strongly attracted to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the young woman and spoke kindly to the young woman. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this young woman as a wife." And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah, his daughter. Now his sons were with his livestock in the field, so Jacob held his peace until they came. Okay, so what we have here is a circumstance, and we really don't know much about it. The wording here is of such that some translations will say that she was raped. Others will say, like this one here, that she was violated. This is a hard situation to discern, because we must understand that for a sexual union to occur that was not done in the cultural way, which is arrangement was made for a marriage to occur, then it would be a violation no matter how you look at it. The tribal culture of Papua New Guinea, very similar. A person has sexual relation with someone, they have stolen something, and they look at it that way. You haven't paid for the right to have a sexual relationship, so there was a violation that occurred. So the word here that is means that says violated is a word that traditionally has been translated either afflicted or oppressed and even humbled. So there does seem to be something that occurred. Now, this, if this was the case, was she violently violated or just premaritally violated? It's kind of hard to tell, though it does seem that most of the translations are using a more of a harsh term here regarding what occurred to this woman here. But we need to understand, people of their times, claiming and taking wives was not uncommon. We already been exposed to it twice with Sarah. When Abraham went to Egypt, Sarah was taken because she was a beautiful woman, just taken, a part of the Pharaoh's harem. And the same thing occurred in the land of the Philistines as well. So this was not an uncommon thing to happen. The reason why I have questioned, was it a violent rape? Because most of the times when that occurs, the rapist is not wanting to marry the person. And in this case, he did. He apparently loved her and was so attracted to her, he said immediately, "Get her as my wife." He talked to his father and his family line. So the fact that he was strongly attracted to her seems to indicate a non-violent rape situation. Absolutely, clearly a violation, but maybe not a violent rape situation like we typically think about it. Though, like I said, most translations are using a force type thing regarding that. Either way, we have to understand that as this thing played out, maybe the best scenario, the way that this could have played out, is if she would have married Shechem, because this was not an uncommon thing as well. To marry someone else, and that alliances get formed that way. You're familiar with European history and the alliances between France and England and Spain, all because of marriages occurred. So anyway, this incident occurs. Whatever occurred there, this incident occurred, and it is of such that we can say Dinah was definitely a victim in the circumstance. However it played out, she was violated in one form or another. Because Shechem should have gone to the parents before he had sexual relationships with her, whether violent or not. So, then what comes here is the formal request for marriage in verses 4 through 12. Okay, let's look at that. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this young woman as wife." And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah's daughter. I read this already. Now his sons were with the livestock in the field, and he waited for them to come back. Verse 6, then Hamor, the father of Shechem, went to Jacob to speak with him. And the sons of Jacob came in from the field, and when they heard it, and the men were grieved and very angry, because he had done a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, a thing which ought not to be done. Absolutely clearly. No way do we want to give the impression that what he did was acceptable. No, there was a violation that occurred, whether it was physical or social, as far as the customs of the day. So Hamor spoke with them, saying, the soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him as wife. And make marriages with us. Give your daughters to us, and I will give our daughters to yourselves. Okay, again, a common thing at this particular time in history. This is where people got their wives from other places, even if they were not necessarily believing clans and tribal groups. So, verse 11, then Shechem said to her father, Jacob, and her brothers, let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me, I will give. Hey, that's a huge statement there. This is how much he longed for Dinah, where he says, I want her so badly as my wife. Whatever you say, I will do. Verse 12. Ask me ever so much dowry and gift, and I will give according to what you say to me, but give me the young woman as a wife. A unique situation. Whatever the violation was, like I said, he was really drawn and wanted her as his wife. Verse 13. Here. The conditions then get set in place, and then they're carried out. But notice what it says there. So the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor his father, and spoke deceitfully. Important word here. Talked about how the fact in the Bible hour here that, and even as we were talking here, Jacob was a man of deceit. His children now following the same pattern for living here. And spoke deceitfully. We're going to see why here as the text unfolds here. Because he had defiled Dinah, their sister. And they said to them, we cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a reproach to us. Notice what they're emphasizing here. Not so much that we're not going to give her because you violated her. No, we're not going to give her because you're not circumcised. But on this condition, we will consent to you. If you will become as we are, if every male of you is circumcised, then we will give our daughters to you. And we will take your daughters to us. And we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. But if you will not heed us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and be gone. Well, as the thing played out, verse 18, these words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son. Remember, he said, I'll do anything. So what proceeds then is a mass circumcision of all the males in this little kingdom. Okay? Verse 19, so the young man did not delay to do the thing because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. He wanted to marry her quickly, so right away they set up this mass circumcision that occurs. Notice what it says there. And again, this reflects back on him and what initially caused this all to happen. It says here that that he was more honorable in verse 19 than all the household of his father. So the motivation for this man seems to be honorable. Verse 20. So Hamor and Shechem, his son, came to the gate of their city. They spoke with the men of their city, saying, these men are at peace with us. Therefore, let them dwell in the land and trade in it, for indeed the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters as wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will the men consent to dwell with us, to be one people, if every man among us is circumcised as they are circumcised. Verse 23 seems to be more of a coercive statement than necessarily an evil scheme. It says, so we will not, if we become one people, will not their livestock and their property and every animal theirs be ours? We'll be all one group of people. Only let us consent to them, and they will dwell with us. And all who went out of the gate of the city heeded Hamor and Shechem his son. Every male was circumcised, and all who went out of the gate of his city. So they all consent to do this. Looks like at this point the story is turning out positive, but not so much. Because what happens here? Verse 25, now it came to pass on the third day, when they were in pain, these are adult males who were getting circumcised, we can understand the pain. The two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, who were Dinah's brothers, took each a sword and came boldly upon the city and killed all the males. This is why they were speaking deceitfully. So Simeon and Levi were the blood brothers. Remember, this is a polygamous unity. There were 4 mothers involved in this. Dinah's blood brothers were Simeon and Levi. What do? They get in their minds, okay, these guys are not going to be able to fight. This is going to be easy for us. Let's take our swords. And because of what they have done to our sister, we are going to kill them all. Okay? And that's what occurred. So, Dinah here, victimized, caught in the circumstances here. Now she is going to be the bait by which this slaughter. There's no way to get around this. This was a slaughter that occurred. They were unable to fight because they were in pain. So these guys go in and kill all the males. Not only that, verse 26 says, and they killed Hamor and Shechem his son with the edge of the sword and took Dinah from Shechem's house and they went out. Didn't stop there. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain. They plundered the city because their sister had been defiled. They took their sheep, their oxen, their donkeys, and what was in the city and what was in the field. And all of their wealth, all of their little ones and their wives they took captive, and they plundered even all that was in the houses. Okay? This was more than just a retribution. Because retribution really would have occurred to Shechem, right? He's the one who did the act, but yet Shechem is the person who's supposed to be the most honorable of all the men there. So we see what happened here. So Dinah now, not only was she violated in one form or another, but now she is also the bait by which this horrific slaughter has occurred. I want you to take note here, a mental note, because these are subplots, right? But this is the same violent attitude of the brothers when they said, let's kill Joseph. It's this quick response. This is the way we deal with problems. We kill people. But it's more than an honor killing here. It wasn't directed at just the perpetrator, but everybody connected with the perpetrator, all the males. I wonder, did this woman named Dinah, did she deal with this deferred guilt type thing? Because really, all these men died because of her. It was kind of like children thinking that they're the reason why they're responsible for a divorce of mom and dad when they had nothing to do with it type thing. Right? You know, or a woman who is sexually abused by her father, but yet she feels somehow responsible for that. Okay, surely Dinah felt some of those feelings. She was taken after the slaughter. So think of the memory of them. She's with her brothers. They've rescued her, so to speak, and she's taken away from these people, but there's dead men laying all around her as they're taking her out of the city. This had to have an impact on her in all of this. On top of this now, the impropriety of Shechem would have made her likely ineligible for a proper marriage. So victimized again in this situation because she was, there's no record of her ever getting married in the scriptures. So violated, She's used as a means by which this slaughter is going to occur, and as far as we know, she never got married. Man, what a deal. What a life she had to live. And she's very obscure in Scripture. This is all we know about her. She's mentioned again in Genesis 40:15, but only as a name in a genealogy. So the reason I want to bring to light of this, though, is because there are people all over the course of time that are like Dinah. They are victims of circumstance. They are used in the schemes of humankind to accomplish desires. So they're used and then kind of tossed aside without concern of their feelings here. So the record here seems to relate the fact that she just kind of slips back into oblivion. She pops up in a harmless situation of wanting to go out and meet other women, apparently, ends up being violated, becomes the source of a great slaughter, and then never gets married herself. So a difficult situation for her. We were talking in the Bible hour about how God still accomplishes things in the poor decisions of humankind. The only positive note of this was that Jacob he was not pleased at all with his sons, but he was not so much displeased that they killed people, but that he was fearful that the people around them then would all come together and attack him. But chapter 35 and verse 5, it relates the fact that, but what it did, it produced fear among all the people around them. And after all, they just wiped out all the males of one particular little kingdom here. So in spite of wrongdoing, the Lord was preserving the children of Israel even amid poor decisions. This was, again, denounced by Jacob at the end of his life. Just like he denounced what Judah did, he denounced what Levi and Simeon did as well. Let me read to you here. I'll just jump ahead. I'll read to you what he says in chapter 49, verses 5 through 7. This is what he says to them. Simeon and Levi are brothers, instruments of cruelty, and in their dwelling place. Let not my soul enter their counsel. This would be years later now. Let not my honor be united with their assembly. And in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they hamstrung an ox. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. It will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. These are two violent boys, prone to react that way. Jacob even noting that this was going to be what their future had for them. Their offspring were going to carry on those same traits. Okay, what can we say here regarding Dinah? Okay, here's what I'd like to just leave this morning. And it's with this. There are Dinahs all around us. There are people who are victims of circumstances, not of their own doing, but yet are casualties. And we need to be sensitive to these type people. What people need a demonstration of compassion. What people need people who can be sympathetic to their circumstances. There are many forms of abuse, and our society has done a good job at detailing those. Of course, there's sexual abuse. We're very familiar with those. Depending upon the statistics that are read, 1 in 4 women are sexually abused. Some statistics say 1 in 3. Today. Right today. So based upon the statistic, 1.5 to 2 of you ladies in here would have been sexually abused, according to the statistics. We know that there's physical abuse to males and females, to children, to elderly. We know that there's emotional abuse all around us. There's spiritual abuse. There's abuse that's taken by people who are in power in a church setting. We read about those things all the time. Okay? These are the results of human beings being sinners and taking advantage of other human beings. Unfortunately, there are people involved in this who are like Dinah's, who are used, and maybe even the use of them is for own selfish use beyond just one single act. But all stems from sin. And we must understand the source of this, because it is Satan that rejoices at these human abuses. With glee, Satan rejoices in any one of these forms of abuses. Because the truth of the matter is, and I don't at all want to take away and demean from the specificness of those abuses that I've mentioned, but on some level, by some definition, I'll re-say that so I don't get misunderstood. On some level and by some definition, every human being is both abused and an abuser, because we're sinners. That should cause us to be compassionate to the Dinahs that are all around us. It is what sinners do. The only hope for healing for the Dinahs all around us is the gospel. That's it. So I would say then, as we look around, let's find those Dinahs that are around us. Let's look for them. Let's look for them, because they are the people who would benefit from compassion and understanding. Because let's keep in mind, like we can assume here in the biblical narrative that Dinah kind of just faded into obscurity, so will these type people, male or female, adult or child. The tendency is just to kind of be absorbed into the fabric of society, to be a non-player anymore. Those are the very people that Jesus can transform a life. So when we find these people, and let's say that's someone I want to strike up a relationship with. There was a little boy that was in the village where I was working in Papua New Guinea, and Jonathan, the missionary, told me that even among the tribal kids, this little boy, for whatever the reason, was kind of bullied. He was picked on all the time. And so Jonathan targeted him and befriended him and gave him things to do, and gave him significance by helping him do things. That would be a Dinah type mentality of going and finding those type people to help. Let's look for and come alongside the Dinahs that are all around us as we live our lives, as we be Jesus to the world around us. Okay? This story will surface in your reading this week, and a little focus on it here this morning. How about if we stand, we'll sing a song, and then we'll pray together here at the end.